The push for road funding, key races this election are stretching out, how we buy cars in Michigan making national news, and the state's ultimate grudge match. MiWeek starts right now.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta.
Hi there, and thanks so much for joining us for MiWeek. I'm Christy McDonald. Just under 2 weeks away until Election Day got us to thinking beyond November 4th and what those lame duck session lawmakers will or won't do when they head back to Lansing. We're looking specifically at funding for roads, and if nothing happens, the plan's in the works to let the people decide. That's coming up. Plus a check on election 2014, numbers shift in big races. Also, what's being called the anti-Tesla bill, bringing up debate on how we sell cars in Michigan and what it means for the future. And finally, you can mark your calendars for a bankruptcy ruling and the state's most famous grudge match. It is all coming up for you on MiWeek, but we are going to start with our roads. Yes, the thing we love to complain about here most in Michigan, including the debate over where the money should come from to fix them. It went nowhere in the legislature this spring or summer. So could this lame duck session end with some kind of road deal? If not, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce is threatening to get involved by getting the road funding issue on the ballot. And that is where we start. So let's bring in our MiWeek contributors, Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of the Detroit Free Press. Gentlemen, it's always good to see you. And it's always good to start talking about roads because the orange construction barrels are kind of still up and rolling this time of year. But so let's look at our lame duck session and when those lawmakers come back after the election. Nolan, do you think that there is some political will to get any kind of road funding transportation deal done?
No, I don't think there's the political will. I don't expect it'll happen. They've been going after this and going after this and going after 10 years now, and they can't come to any agreement. We haven't raised the fuel tax, raised revenue for roads since 1997. I wouldn't expect they're going to do it in this lame duck, even though now would be the perfect time to come in and say, look, we're going to do a 15-cent gas tax because gas is now in many places under $3.
Yeah, it's really taking it down.
If you're ever going to raise the gas tax, now's the time to do it. You put it on now, and people don't feel it the same way they would have when gas was $3.89 a gallon. This is lame duck would be a perfect opportunity, but I don't see the political will. Too many people, too many of them have been out there on the campaign trail saying no new taxes. We'll not raise taxes for anything. I don't see it happening.
But the governor said that he thinks that maybe something could happen, and we have seen stranger things have happened in lame duck sessions.
We have, and the governor's been very active, or I should say the government has been very active during lame duck over the last 4 years, and in some cases doing things that the governor said he might not have wanted to do, but that he ends up signing anyway. I think this is a real test of his relationship with the legislature and his command over the agenda there. This is he said earlier this year and last year this was number one on his list of things to get done, and they have thwarted him so far. One of the real tests, I think, in his candidacy for re-election is, what is that relationship like? This is a governor who's gotten a lot of things done, but hasn't been able to break through on this. Can he build the kind of political capital and maybe just goodwill to get them to do this? You have leaders in both houses are term limited, which means they will not be back in January, which sort of is a good time to do something on your way out the door that you think is just the right thing.
Is that then have the feeling of that, well, you got nothing to lose, so you might as well just try to get something that might be slightly politically unpopular, that might not get you reelected, but you don't have that problem.
Or another way to think about it is, I'm leaving government. Both Jace Bolger and Randy Richardville are leaving government. Why not leave on a high note, doing something that you know needs to be done and that the people want, but that the sort of political will is running in the opposite
Well,
direction.
one reason is because you've got a lot of folks in there who are striving for leadership positions in the next legislature, and you've got a lot of really odd characters likely coming in for the next legislative session who are going to hold them to this no tax pledge. I don't think they're going to move on it, particularly those who see themselves in the speaker's chair and the majority leader's chair and are trying to build coalitions for those jobs. I think the lame duck will be all about leveraging for power and influence in the next session.
Also the fact that they haven't been able to do something in 10 years, and here you have a session that's about 6 weeks long, to be able to try to figure that out or get agreement on something like that.
Well, but there's a plan on the table. It's not like they had to start from scratch. The governor has a plan on the table that will work, and there's no question about the numbers or the wisdom of it. From a policy standpoint, all you do is vote on it. This is not rocket science, and if they can't deliver something like this, that voters say they want, that we all know, anyone who drives a car can tell you how badly we need this
But
solution.
the chamber's going to put some pressure on.
All right, so let's talk about that. The fact that they're saying, well, look, if the legislators don't move on this, we're going to start the slow push by starting a citizens ballot initiative.
And it's a very unusual move for the state chamber. They don't like government by ballot initiatives. They've always been against that and have opposed that method of governing, and they've also been reluctant to increase taxes. And yet they're so fed up with the roads and so fed up by the inactivity of this legislature that they're threatening to do a citizens initiative, get enough signatures to force a vote on a road funding package, and if the legislature votes it down, it goes on the ballot, and the people will decide.
What specifically are they looking at? Are they looking at taking the sales tax from fuel purchases?
Right now, that's where the proposal is. There's a 6% sales tax on fuel. None of that goes to the roads now. It goes into the general fund. They would take that money, it's about $500 million, put it in the roads, and then force the legislature to fill the gap.
So then when I say, when I hear $500 million and forcing the legislature to fill the gap, where does that come from? That's got to come from out of sopoplace else.
It's got to come someplace else. And again, I mean, I think there are options on the table that we've been talking about. The fuel tax, as Nolan pointed out, hasn't been raised since 1997. We still have not talked about whether licensing fees for your vehicle should go up. Charging these trucks, these giant trucks that come rumbling through the state all the time and pay less by weight than they would in other states. These are all really sensible ways to raise new revenue. I'm not sure what the lobby is against doing that or why we're listening to the lobby against doing that. It's just a matter of standing up and saying, this is something that's got to be done, this is the way to do it, and get through that.
Well, these lawmakers have created a narrative that's a majority of Michigan residents believe, according to the polling, that we've got enough money for roads, we just spend it poorly.
Yeah.
And we do spend a lot of it poorly, but we also don't have a lot of money for roads.
Yeah, we need more.
All right, so again, explain though what a ballot initiative would be. This isn't something that you're going to be collecting a bunch of signatures and then waiting for a year for this to be actually on a ballot for people to vote on. This would go directly to the legislature, and if they don't act on it in 40 days, then it would go.
It's like the abortion bills they pushed through last term. You go out, you get X amount of signatures, I don't know what the number is, and
It's a low number.
Yeah, and the legislature has to vote yes or no. If they vote no, it goes to the ballot in the fall of 2016. If they vote yes, it goes into law without the governor's signature. The governor won't need to sign it.
Well, let's hope that they figure out something before 2016.
Yeah, well, but the problem with that solution is that the governor's not the roadblock here. The legislature is. The governor's all in on his plan and probably would negotiate for something different. It's the legislature that's in the way.
Okay, so before we leave talking about the lame duck session, you think it's going to be a lot about jockeying for power. Any other issues on the table that we might see crop up? Because again, this is where we saw right to work happen in a lame duck session.
Yeah, I think there is some fear that the apportionment for our electoral votes, changing that to by congressional district, which is something you hear whispers about out of the GOP caucus in Lansing. I think there's some fear that something like that could come up just the way Right to Work did, figuring, we can get this done and maybe get the governor to sign it before we get out of town. I really hope that's not the case. We asked the governor about that when he came in to see us. He wouldn't commit to one way or another on it, so I'm a little afraid that if it does come up, he'll he'll not stand up the way he should. But I have heard people say that they're afraid that the GOP will try to do that.
Well, if that comes up, then nothing else gets done. There will be no road deal. I mean, because to get a road deal, you need Republicans and Democrats in a coalition. If you throw that on the table, they're just going to bunker
You get
down
no
in
Democratic
their
votes,
in their
sure.
partisan caucuses, and that'll be it.
All right. Well, turning now to election 2014, less than 2 weeks to go. Some races are beginning to stretch out a little bit. The latest poll puts the governor up 8 points, 47 to 39%. The attorney general is up 10%. Secretary of State up 9 points, plus the 11th congressional district, Congressman Kerry Benivolio following through on that write-in campaign. So we have a couple of things to talk about as we're in these last few weeks here. Again, the governor's race, we saw that stretch. Why is that significant for you, Stephen?
Well, I think that it's the commitment of independent voters, at least in our poll, that we saw more independent voters sort of moving toward Rick Snyder than toward Mark Schauer. Our poll was an outlier, though. I mean, there were several other polls this week that showed the race closer. I'm not sure what explains the difference. I think all these polls, though, you got to look at over time what the trend is, and certainly the trend in our poll has been that the governor's pulling away from Schauer. I think the most notable thing is that this is the first poll since the town hall, and you didn't see a Schauer bounce out of that, and that was, I think, what his hope had to be.
But
was
you
that
know, somebody's seeing something, because I heard this morning that the Democratic Governors Association is pouring $2 million into that campaign for the final weeks. If they thought it was stretching out,
they wouldn't
They
be
might
doing
pull
it.
they
back
wouldn't
a little
be,
bit.
because there's too many races across the country where that money's needed. So,
Yeah.
you know, maybe they're believing those other polls we've seen. You know, there are flaws in all of those.
It's very
Well, it's
difficult.
not an
It's a
exact
very
science.
difficult thing to do, is to predict how people are going to behave on election day. But again, it's the trends across time. You look at the same poll and
Right.
how it moves each time you take it, as opposed to trying to compare one poll, which has a certain kind of sample and methodology, to another poll, which may be doing it.
So
very
your poll,
differently.
you were 6, now 8.
It's
so
now
it
8.
suggests a trend line. We're in the field. We'll be out with a poll later this week, and you know, it'll be interesting to see. We were at 8 last time. Be interesting to see how it tracks.
Yeah.
I think the interesting number I pulled out of the poll was looking at the number of independents, and that was a 20-point gap
Yeah.
for the governor as opposed to Mark Schauer. So that was a very interesting look for me on that.
Yeah, I mean that's who decides races in Michigan. That's how Snyder won last time, was by getting independents to think that he was better. I think if you're the Democrats this time, though, you're hoping that more of those sort of core Democratic voters who have shown up in 2008 and 2012 show up for this midterm election. And one indication of how close it might be is that the number of absentee ballots that have been requested, especially on the Democratic side, is up pretty significantly. If they can, and that suggests that those are those 2008, 2012 voters, perhaps, that you're reaching there. If you get enough of them to the polls, if you get enough of them to cast a ballot, Mark Schauer has a real chance of winning.
But Republicans claim they're matching that absentee ballot drive. This is a base election. You got to get the independents for sure. But if you get the independents and don't get your base out, you're
Yeah,
still
you're in
in
big
trouble.
trouble.
Yeah.
And that's why you're seeing all these people come in. Bill Clinton and Jeb Bush and President Obama, they're not coming in here to rally independent voters. They're coming
They're
in
rallying
here
the base.
to make sure Democratic voters, Republican voters get up on that Tuesday morning and say, I'm going to vote. And you know, it's all about getting your people out. That's why they're doing all of this early voting drives, and why they've got so many voter contact efforts underway.
I think what's also interesting when you look at these polling numbers, and what is always fascinating to me about Michigan and Michigan politics, is you have this top of the ticket here, which skews so Republican. If you look at the polls, with the governor leading, and also with the Attorney General Bill Schuette leading, Secretary of State Ruth Johnson leading, and then you've got this statewide Senate race where you've got the numbers flipped, and Gary Peters has an 11-point lead over Terry Lynn Land, and yet you have a congressional delegation that is skewing more Democratic. I think it's always fascinating to look that in Michigan we're kind of a little bit of toss-up
this is
here.
a weird state in some ways, in the sense of that split. Top of the ticket, Michigan has not voted, for instance, for a Republican candidate for president since, I think, 1988. but has had, Republican governors, 2 of them since that time. As you point out, the congressional delegation is largely Republican, but that's about gerrymandering. There are more Democratic votes cast for Congress than there are Republicans, but the way the map is drawn, the Republicans get the majority of the seats. Michigan has also not sent a Republican to the Senate since, 98?
Well, Spence Abraham.
Spence Abraham.
I mean, in federal elections, the state tends to vote Democrat. I mean, and there are more registered Democrats in the state, but when it comes to picking statewide officers, they have, over the last 20 years, put far more Republicans in place than they have Democrats.
It's an interesting look. All right, well, the countdown continues to be on. Taking a look now at how we buy cars in Michigan this week, the governor signed what's being called the anti-Tesla bill. Tesla is an electric car maker out of California that sells direct to customers. There are no dealers. Well, the bill the governor signed says manufacturers can only sell through franchise dealers in Michigan. Big backer of this bill, General Motors and Michigan's auto dealers. Analysts say this is not just about Tesla, but future companies as well. And this has really started a national conversation. Michigan isn't the only state that has been dealing with Tesla on this issue, but how we buy our cars and these franchising laws, and should somewhere along the line those things be changed?
Well, it's the auto dealers are very closely connected with the auto companies here, and that's a very, very powerful lobby. So the laws are set up right now to protect their interests. I think the question is whether that protects customers' interests. I think Tesla would say it doesn't. That why should I have to go to a dealer to buy a car? There's not a really great public interest reason that's so. I think this is an interesting test for the governor, who, is Mr. Innovation, Mr. Free Market, and here he is standing in the way of a pretty innovative company that's saying, open up the market and let me sell there. Rick Snyder was CEO of Gateway, which was one of the pioneers in this whole idea of, getting away from the authorized dealer model to direct sales. So there's a little bit of a conflict there, but I don't think he had much choice. The auto dealers would have eaten him alive
he couldn't have done
if he had not
done
done
anything
this.
else. And direct sales are still sort of rare, particularly for manufactured goods. You don't buy your washing machine directly from Whirlpool. I mean, it goes through.
Can't you?
I don't think so. I mean, you're not getting cereal direct from General Mills. I mean, most things go through a retail outlet, and automobiles have been sold that same way. Nothing really unusual about this arrangement.
But what's the reason to make you have to do that? I mean, in some instances, you're talking about regulatory reasons, right? Food, for instance, food safety is tied up in grocery stores and things like that.
So.
It's a
I'm
little
not sure your
different from
food's
a
any
car.
safer because it got transported and sold at the Farmer Jack. I mean, these are franchising laws intended to protect local businesses.
Yeah.
Not uncommon. There's a number of these sorts of laws aimed at protecting the local business base, and the auto dealers are a critical business component of most communities in this
Of a
state.
lot of communities in terms of jobs and in terms of also charitable giving, I know, in a
saw-
lot of the communities. But very, very interesting, though, Tesla, which sells such a fraction of automobiles, should be of no threat to General Motors.
the precedent?
What's the big?
It's the precedent.
I was going to say, what's the big
Open.
picture here?
They
Are
don't
we
want
looking at
General
other
Motors
companies?
doing it. It's the precedent. They don't want to establish this because first it's Tesla, then it's Toyota, and then it's Chrysler.
I mean, I think one of the opportunities here for the governor was to put some pressure on Tesla. Tesla is an interesting company in that it is trying to manufacture cars and doing everything it can not to have anything to do with the state of Michigan. They don't make the batteries here for these things. They are not buying parts from a lot of people in this state. I mean, was there an opportunity here to leverage some more Tesla infrastructure or manufacturing here in Michigan by agreeing to do this? I'm not sure that there was, but by saying no, you certainly don't make it any more likely that Tesla is going to be more friendly to the state of Michigan.
And California puts some of the most onerous regulations on
Right.
our automakers, the Detroit
Yes.
automakers. It's extraordinarily difficult to sell an American car in California. I think there wasn't much a mood in the Michigan legislature to help out a California company. It's sort of what goes around comes around.
So could we see this question, though, come up on a federal level, on a national level in the next couple of years or so?
Well, I think it's a competition question ultimately, right? If Tesla is successful, I mean, and Tesla is making really expensive cars that a very small number of people can buy.
Right.
But if that model that he's building works and can be expanded to, run-of-the-mill vehicles, then there will be pressure to let people do it. I mean, you don't want to make Michigan an outlier and the only state that doesn't allow it. And we are already a very different state in terms of the regulations with auto dealers. It's a lot easier to buy cars in other states. Sunday sales, all-day Saturday sales.
But that's not law. That's the dealer's own choice.
That's just the dealers, right?
I mean, that's a competition factor.
Right.
All right, well, we'll leave it there. But, under the brief but important headline, we will get a ruling in Detroit's bankruptcy right after the election. The 8th version of the plan of adjustment is in. So did you ever think that you would have a final date on your calendar that you could X off the first real week of November, that this is where you're finally going to get the ruling on Detroit's bankruptcy?
I thought we're always headed toward a fall wrap up for the bankruptcy, just based on the pacing. Getting that last creditor to settle, I think, just wiped the last barrier out of the way to doing that. I'm really interested to see I think there's very little question about what Judge Rhodes is going to do. Ruling this quickly almost certainly means that he's going to approve the grand bargain and the plan of adjustment. But the question is how he does it, and how he does it in a way that sets the city up to succeed in the future. I think there's still real questions about revenue out of that plan. I think he shares some of those concerns. He may also share some concerns about some of these deals to settle. He has sent people back before to do better by the city. So,
what do you think, Nolan?
I was a little surprised. I thought he'd take longer to write this thing, because it is a precedent-setting decision.
But you can't appeal it now because all the creditors have settled. So,
but it will come into play in other bankruptcy. So I thought he'd take a little more time. But this is a guy who's pushed it along. He's been deadline oriented, and I think it's a triumph for the city, a triumph for the federal courts that this thing got done the way it did. A lot of heroes in this process. Foundation communities certainly have to be credited for stepping up. This would not have happened had that money not come in for the grand bargain to save the art. So, as it turns out, the DIA art, having it under threat was a beneficial thing for the city, because it drove people out to rally, to raise the money to save it and get this deal done.
It inspired interesting deals. So once we hear this decision from the judge, what does that mean then on Monday morning, then, after that decision is read?
Well, I think it means that the agreement that was made between the city government and Kevin Orr starts to take shape, and we start to see how that practically plays out. Kevin Orr essentially is not going to be running the city at that point. I talked with the mayor this week. He talked about the hours that he's had to spend every week dealing with lawyers, talking about this bankruptcy proceeding. He gets that time back, and so he will get to actually govern in that time and plan to do things and sort of pay attention to the city's other pressing problems. I think you will see a very different Duggan administration emerge on the other side of this, a sort of fuller governing Duggan administration than we've seen so far.
And I also think, it's too bad this thing's not happening a week earlier, because Rick Snyder deserves a tremendous amount of credit for this. This would not have happened.
Yeah.
This would not have happened without his leadership. He was courageous, he was determined, and he was really relentless in pushing this through and making it happen in a way that was the least harmful in Detroit. And in fact, you're going to have a better Detroit come out of this. If we don't screw it up, Detroit is going to be well positioned. $8 billion less debt, $140 million a year more to operate with. it's going to be a lot more positive coming out of bankruptcy than we could have dreamed a year ago.
All right, and we'll be watching. But now to what people are really talking about, the ultimate state grudge match. It's Michigan State this minute, in the last minute that we have left. And I saw those Spartans painted the diag in Ann Arbor. They were not too thrilled with that. I do not support any kind of vandalism whatsoever.
I'm sure.
I do not. I was
Can we
not.
see your fingernails
Please,
to
I have
make sure there's no green
cans
paint?
of green spray paint. But it's going to be a game, Nolan. I know that you like to be neutral.
No, I mean, I think it would be a shock if Michigan pulled this one out, and what you're going to have is
Look how serious he is.
a whole lot of whiny Wolverines. Bo Schembechler, Bo Schembechler, Bo Schembechler. That's all you're going to hear this weekend.
All right, you get the last word in 10 seconds.
I will be a Michigan fan my whole life. Win or lose, whatever. We are still we'll always be Michigan.
He falls asleep. We
always
put one of them
be
green
Michigan.
S's on the back of that head.
That's right. Oh, it's good. It's nice and
Good
short for it.
surface.
That's all right.
All right, and that is going to do it for My Week. Thanks for joining us. Mark your calendar. Monday, November 3rd, we're going to be doing a live election special right here on Detroit Public TV, 7 p.m. Join Nolan, Stephen, and myself. Complete coverage of the election. Remember, you can always check us out, myweek.org. I'm Christy McDonald. Have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Recently, Michigan's economy has begun to turn around. Michigan's gained over 250,000 new jobs. We've paid off $20 billion in long-term debt. And our population is increasing for the first time in a decade. But to make Michigan a top 10 state, there's still plenty of work to be done. Step up and help put Michigan on top. Learn what you can do at MichiganTurnaroundPlan.com.
Funding is also provided by Delta,